Blimey. Ooh, this is one out of a jam jar you got here.
Warning. The House of Mystery contains demons, angels, elementals, magicians, wizards, apparitions, adult language, and discussions. If you're easily offended, do not enter the House of Mystery.
All right, then. On with the show.
All right, welcome everyone to the House of Mystery. It's good to be back. I am Michael, the curator of the House of Mystery, and this is the John Constantine and Friends podcast. That's what we do. That's what we cover on this show. And when I say we, I'm obviously talking about myself and my cohort, the demon bisexual butler.
Hello, everybody.
Were you not prepared? You seem like you were lost and confused.
For a second, yes, for a second.
Is that a bit of that brain fog I keep hearing about from long COVID?
No, I just was actually, unfortunately, I saw a picture of Zatanna in a very, very promiscuous way, and I got distracted very heavily. My heart started beating a little too rapid.
What a sleaze. Looking at comic book porn while we're in the middle of a show.
Not my fault, Mike. It's not my fault.
Most people look at those things in the privacy of their home.
I was simply bringing up my comic book app that I steal comics from.
Okay. And you're also living up to the demon bisexual butler name. So it's okay. You're on par with your character.
You have to be who you are.
For this show, right?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. All right. So if people have been wondering where we've been, this is the longest break we've ever taken from this show since it started 2 years ago. Unfortunately, it was out of our control. David had some serious medical scares, pretty much almost died. Luckily, he is back in the studio. He's healthy. I got attacked by a serious case of COVID. Yeah. I was completely out of sorts for 2 weeks. So right when David got better, I got sick. So that's the reason why we've been so delayed. We are here now, and we are going to work our damnedest to catch up on all of the Constantine content that has been coming out. We have the what is it, the vampire verse, what's it called? All Out
DC,
War.
Yeah, DC versus vampires.
DC versus vampires, we're going to be talking about. We're also going to be breaking down the Sandman Netflix series, not per episode. We're going to be tackling it.
I think our heads would explode.
In parts. So we'll be getting that out to you guys as well. But today, what we're going to be talking about is the long gestating series or anthology series. And I say long gestating because we've been talking about covering this since last year.
Yes.
And finally, we are here. And we're going to be talking about Batman Urban Legends, which is an anthology series. And there may be some listeners out there saying, Batman? Why Batman? Well, John Constantine and Zatanna are both big key aspects of this particular story.
Yes.
In Urban Legends, which we'll get to in just a second. Now, if you're new to our show, I welcome you all to the House of Mystery. We cover a wide variety of Constantine and related content, and you can find this podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. Just search House of Mystery. Now, due to their rating and review systems, iTunes and Spotify are our preferred feeds. So we ask that you leave us a review and rate the show. Okay, David, so Batman Urban Legends. It is part of an anthology series.
Yes.
And the story we're going to be talking about, we're not going to be breaking down the entire comic because the entire comic, as I said, is an anthology series. So there's numerous stories and
numerous characters
in one issue. Yes. The one we're going to focus on starts in issue 11 and ends in issue 16. Yeah. And it features Batman and Zatanna as well as Constantine. And the title is Bound to Our Will.
Yes.
Part 1 and 6, or through 6.
Yeah. And it's one of the bigger storylines in Urban Legends because
it's one of the most talked about.
Yes.
Because of the inclusion of Zatanna and Constantine, and also because of the relationship that they built out between Zatanna and Batman. and also the common ground that Batman and Constantine find in this series, which is one of the highlights of the storyline.
Which happens to be Zatanna, but
she's the common ground.
She's more ways than one.
Listen, I still think it should have been an Eiffel Tower at the end. That's offensive. How dare you?
But
put words in my mouth.
But the more interesting part about like Bound to the whole storyline that they put forth was to show that Batman has more, and I want to say a stronger relationship with a character like Zatanna than he does with like a character that DC has pushed since, I don't know, forever, is Catwoman. If you were to actually choose, who would you rather see, Batman and Catwoman or Batman and Zatanna?
Come on, David. Why are you messing with my hormones? Why not both? Hey, what's that song you learned in elementary school? Make new friends, but keep the old. Like the same thing applies here, Dave.
You want all three.
Yes.
Except you don't want Batman. You want John Constantine, Zatanna, and Catwoman.
You know what? That's even
better.
That's even better. Let's throw Poison Ivy in there as well, and Cersei. She's hot sometimes, right? The witch Cersei.
You could throw Harley into there and everything else. Okay. I think you could throw a big giant lesbian orgy.
Basically, I want a porno. I mean,
you want a porno.
Okay, so the writer for this series here was Vita Ayala. And the art was done by Nicola Cesamiscia, Nick Filardi, and Steve Wands. I probably butchered those names, and I apologize.
You did better than I did.
So the synopsis, Bound to Our Will, focused on Batman and Zatanna. Specifically, it dug into the early days of their relationship, years before they became costumed heroes, as they shared a summer afternoon. Bruce couldn't stop noticing how beautiful Zatanna was as they spent time together. That's the stuff I struggle with right there on this. It's a little, listen, I'm a romantic, but I don't like cheese. Like, that's a little cheesy.
It's a little on the nose.
Because in the comic book, he literally does that. I can't help but notice. They even cast a spell together, briefly sharing a, what is that? A psionic connection?
Yeah, psionic connection.
Psionic connection. But the spell went out of control, suddenly creating a massive rift in reality just above the pair that they barely contained. Since then, the pair have come together every year to work together and counter the rift. When it reopens, Zatanna and Batman are eventually forced to come closer together and possibly shatter that bond between them in an attempt to finally put an end to the spell. However, this left the rift open to cause more chaos and made them the target of a mysterious threat. Okay, Dave, so I'm going to say this right off the bat. I struggled a bit with this storyline. The storyline had an intriguing concept. Absolutely has an intriguing concept. Writer Vita Ayala, she delves into Batman and Zatanna's past to tell a story that is chronologically in the present. And without getting too much into the ins and outs of the plot, essentially, Urban Legends Bound to Our Will is a bit of a love story. Or perhaps a failed love story might be a better way of saying it. It builds on the notion that Batman and Zatanna have this troubled relationship and sets to justify their on-again, off-again relationship status that we've all been privy to. If you've read a Batman and Zatanna story throughout the last, 20, 30 years, that is a common element when it comes to them. They're on-again, off-again. And there's always illusions of some type that they have dated or they are dating. But now what we get with this story is a definitive yes. They were together at some time, not just in the present storylines of the comics, but even as far back as before they were costumed heroes.
Yes.
So they get to work on making sense of, I wouldn't call them plot holes, just those illusions and casual comments back and forth, right?
Yes.
And this is also where Constantine is utilized to get inside of Batman's head.
Well, not only Batman,
his psyche. It helps. Using the character Constantine helps us to understand how Batman feels, because we know Batman isn't the type of guy that is willing to share his feelings. You know, for all intents and purposes, Constantine is designed as, I would say, an antagonistic type writing device
Yes.
that agitates a scene and loosens the narrative in a way that really exposes what the writer is trying to say. Things that basic rudimentary plot structures usually does little to reveal. And by using Constantine as that antagonistical force, you're able to understand and get Batman to start talking. Because
Yes.
Batman doesn't share.
No.
That's not his thing. But
And that's ultimately what this story is about. The story is about communication.
yep.
And Constantine is used as almost kind of like a therapist, only a very strange and obtuse therapist for both Batman and Zatanna, because Constantine's playing the middleman. He plays the thing, oh, you mean you're wondering about this? Well, why didn't you talk to her? Why are you telling me?
Yeah.
And like, the beautiful thing that I really liked was the play between Batman, Constantine, and Zatanna, because we know Constantine's agenda when it comes to this relationship. He has a relationship with Zatanna. We all know this. Batman's the prior ex.
Their relationship is pure.
Their relationship is pure. But like Constantine's relationship with Zatanna is basically, and I love the fact that at one point they pointed out at one point, Batman said Constantine and Zatanna communicate better
Yeah.
than he and Zatanna do.
Right.
And then Constantine says, well, that's because I talked to her.
Yeah. It's called, you got to open your mouth and let words come out.
And let words come out.
That is called communication.
And that's what I liked about, like, even though Constantine is a jerk in this in this story, he's the type of jerk that at the end of the day, Batman wants to be Constantine. He wants to have that because there was one point at the story he was like going, he wanted to have that communication that he has with Constantine and Zatanna have. And then Constantine's like going, well, I can't help you there, man. This is your problem. You have to communicate more.
Yeah.
And I like the fact that they use Constantine as kind of like that needler when it comes to, well, why aren't you doing this?
Well, and that's the thing that I felt worked for this comic. Without him, this wouldn't have been very good.
Absolutely, yes.
And I hope that doesn't come off too incredibly biased, because obviously John Constantine is one of our favorite characters of all time. But Constantine by far was the best part of the storyline.
Oh, yeah.
Which I don't know if that's a good thing when you're writing a Batman story. Ayala, for the most part, seemed to understand Constantine's characterization and his true motivations. As we know, John likes to pretend not to care, but when it comes down to it, he will do what he has to do, especially if Zatanna is involved. You might not like his methods, but he's effective, and that's what Ayala did here with Constantine. She also used John and Zatanna's past, which I thought was smart, as a way to help the reader better understand the immediate issues pertaining to Bruce and Zatanna's estranged relationship.
Yeah.
So that was strong as well. But yeah, if Constantine was not a part of this, then it just wouldn't have been a good story at all.
It would be a lot of, I think without Constantine there, it would have turned into really overhyped melodrama.
Yeah.
Two people who won't communicate with each other when the answer is you just need to communicate. And that's why I think it was a very brilliant choice not to make this a two-person story like most of the urban legends are two-person story. It's Batman dealing with one character. In this particular story, they chose three characters. Batman, the main is Batman and Zatanna, but they brought in Constantine to be kind of like that.
He's a writing device.
Writing device. He, just like what you said, is like he is that writing device. He's used as that third party to be the person who drives the story forward.
Mm-hmm.
So you don't get too muddled with the melodrama. Because if you notice, every time the melodrama starts picking up, something happens to Constantine, or Constantine does something to push the narrative forward.
Yeah, well, he brought an element of realism or let's say more naturalistic flair to romance and love and lost love or missed opportunities, because I felt like at the beginning in that first issue where you see Batman and Zatanna, on a grassy field having a picnic,
Picnic.
it makes me feel like the writer never has had a real relationship. And this is what they view
They view it,
relationships are, like the
yes.
stereotype. Oh, we're going to have champagne and have strawberries and chocolate on a grassy hill. It felt very cliche.
It does.
But Constantine being introduced brought a more mature element that balanced out the immaturity of the initial setting of Zatanna and Batman's relationship. And then it became something a little more easily digestible for me, at least as a reader, when we started to see the ins and outs of their relationships and why it failed because of this rift that they created. And
Yeah.
I still don't follow some of the dots, and I've read it twice. Like, why did Batman and Zatanna quit talking? Because of this rift? Why was it unspoken? Because they accidentally tore something open? It just
Yes.
it feels flimsy.
It feels flimsy.
The key motivational aspect of the storyline is flimsy.
And it feels kind of forced.
Exactly. Why would you have two superheroes that work side by side for years and years and years refuse to talk to each other because they accidentally opened up a rift
Yes.
that sure tainted their romance, right? Because before they even had a chance to get going, this accident happened. Perhaps you can look at it like that, but still, it's a bit of a flimsy motivation when you're using that as your setup for the entire storyline. But again, that's why I say John Constantine was the best part, because he brings not just elements that feel more cohesive and really drives up the maturity value or the maturity element to the story, but he's also a distraction, a welcome distraction to some of the lesser interesting aspects pertaining to Batman and Zatanna, because like any good writer with Constantine, he's going to take the focus because he's just an interesting character. The way he deals with things, the way he handles it, situations, whether they be on the magical front or the human side of things, where he has to deal with people like Zatanna. He's just a far more interesting character for those types of stories. To me, Batman isn't always that type of character that should be used in those types of stories.
Yeah. And that's the thing. It's kind of like
I don't know. Does that make sense? It doesn't feel. The reason why it didn't feel right is that it just doesn't feel very much like the writer understood Batman.
Yes.
They understood Zatanna and Constantine, but didn't quite understood Batman because this version of Batman just wasn't interesting.
Yeah, he wasn't. He was very, in a lot of ways, he was very diluted, because when you have a Batman that is guilt-ridden, right?
Mhm.
We understand that the character of Batman, deals with elements of depression
Right.
and guilt and trauma and all that good stuff.
Maybe even psychosis at
and
times.
maybe psychosis. But like the way he's portrayed here is kind of like a very emo high schooler who has a broken heart.
There you go. That is the best way to put it. And that doesn't feel like that's a part of Batman's characterization.
Exactly.
He doesn't pine after women.
He doesn't pine. He basically embraces that trauma and that guilt. And if they were to delve into the fact that basically maybe Zatanna was the one who carried on this grudge,
harboring these
harboring
emotions,
the
yeah.
guilt and can't come over it,
Mm-hmm.
and you flip it, I think the way it was portrayed would have been better, because I could see that they were trying to portray Zatanna as the alpha in that relationship. Like, she's the one that basically Bruce has to apologize to.
She sets the
right?
terms of their
She
relationship.
sets the terms of the relationship.
Yeah.
When you're dealing with a series like Batman Urban Legends, as an anthology, we're supposed to actually see Batman as one specific thing. Everything that all of us as fans can gravitate towards and say, yeah, that's Batman. That's who Bruce Wayne is. This is the one story in Urban Legends where it kind of deviates because you see a Batman who is more guilt-ridden.
Doesn't that feel more like Constantine?
Yeah, he's more guilt-ridden. He's more lighthearted. Like, I think that I've read a lot of the other stories of Batman in Urban Legends. This is the one story where they portray Batman smiling, where he's more lighthearted.
Yeah, it's weird.
And it's very strange.
It's off-putting.
Now, I felt if they flipped it and did it Zatanna that way, and Zatanna having to apologize to Batman, that would have worked better.
Apologize.
Because like then you can understand the characteristics set. But I think that they didn't want that. I think the writer was worried if he did that, he would portray Zatanna in a weak light.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a very dicey thing to do.
Right.
Because I could see them going, we can't make the woman in this relationship look weak.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
and
Well, yeah, I understand. The years and years and years of just dumping on some female characters to privilege male characters. That's
Exactly.
what you're talking about, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And they were worried that they were probably going to do that.
Yeah,
So let's just
I can
make
see that.
Batman more lighthearted in this regard, and probably that's why they brought in Constantine, because they knew they were taking a gamble with the character of Batman. Okay, let's bring
Yeah.
in a third force in here to kind of galvanize the focus on Batman, because we're going to have Constantine be kind of like the devil on his shoulder.
Or the writer was hoping that she would be hired to write a Constantine and Zatanna story, and they said, no, you're actually hired to write a Batman story.
Batman
She's like,
story.
okay, let me see if I can make this work. Which then I give her some props, because I would have done the same thing. Like, I don't want to write a fucking Batman story. I'm like, okay, all right, sure, Batman, all right, guest starring Zatanna, meaning starring, and Constantine, and then just sideline Batman
And just
make him
basically
an
go-
emo little bitch.
Yeah, he's going to be turned into a little emo bitch.
Yeah. I will say the strength of the storyline, and this is why I can't complain too much, because even though the overall story was kind of blah, it wasn't super original or unique by any means. Like I said, it felt some aspects just didn't work. But I will say that the strength of these stories is the way they handled John Constantine. I did like, for the most part, there were a few things I didn't like, but for the most part, they handled that character correctly. And I've said this before, that the key to setting an exciting tone for John Constantine fans is to make sure you have a cool-ass introduction.
Yes.
In the very first issue,
I'm glad you
after
brought that
we
up.
see what Batman and Zatanna have done, this riff that they tore in reality, in the adjacent page, you have Constantine slouching at a bar, drinking, because he senses that they fucked up, that they did something. It's
Yes.
just perfect
It's
the way
perfect.
they do it. And then the official introduction, which was the second issue, had Constantine in the shadows walking into Batman's alleged hiding place that, of course, Constantine has no problem finding.
Yes.
And he's in the shadows while lighting a cigarette.
While lighting a cigarette.
It is a good introduction.
Well, the thing I love about that introduction, especially, I'm glad you brought up the beginning. You have them deal with the rift, right? And it explodes. But then you cut to arguably
All of the key players.
all the key magic players.
Yeah, key magical players.
Like you have Dr. Fate, you have Circe, and you have I forgot her name now.
It wasn't Pandora, was it?
I think it was Pandora.
That's what I thought.
But like you have all of them sense, oh, something went bad. And then meanwhile, in the small corner, you have Constantine turn to the camera and go, bloody hell, what? And I'm like, oh, that's the real, what they're saying is like the four most powerful magic users in DC Universe are these characters, and Constantine happens to be one of them.
Yeah.
And like when exactly what you said, when you go to his introduction, I'm like going, yeah, Batman may be cool. He may be able to actually go from shadow to shadow and have this cool monologue with you, and all of a sudden you'll turn around and he'll disappear. Constantine's entrance is iconic because
It's good.
he'll show up out of the shadows smoking a cigarette with a smile, and that smile means you're in trouble because you either can stay and get his help, or you are in a lot of trouble and you're going to go to hell some way or another.
Yeah. All right. So let's talk about the art briefly here. I respect comic artists too much to be too harsh. So I'll say the art was okay. There were times when it really popped, especially during the magical moments, the Constantine
Yes.
stuff, the Zatanna and Batman when they're trying to close the rift. There are some really just dynamic moments in the overall 6-part story.
Yeah.
But then, more often than not, there were times that felt like I was simply looking at a sketch, like an unfinished panel
Oh, yeah.
that was thrown together and then they colored it.
You have also panels of empty white space with a lot of characters, which is, to me is
Yeah.
just really bad because, like,
I mean, remember Bazooka Joe bubblegum? Like, some of the art resembled Bazooka Joe bubblegum.
actually, yeah, you got a good point there. I mean,
Didn't
especially,
it?
especially in the very beginning with some of the panels that I have in front of me, like the one that I really thought was very lackluster was anytime they went into the Justice League and suddenly they're talking with Superman and the background's just
stupid.
white.
And,
And
yes.
and I'm like going, okay, wait a minute. So you mean to tell me you can do these amazing dynamic splash pages with magic involved, but when you are, maybe it was a creative choice. I don't know.
Could be.
Now that I think about it, but I think it's a poor creative choice because, like, it more or less makes you look lazy because you're going, well, they're in the real world now, so the real world is plain. No, that's a terrible thing to put because, like, if you're just gonna put a white background behind a character, it does look like what you alluded to, where it just feels unfinished.
Yeah.
It feels like a sketch, and suddenly, instead of actually focusing on, characters talking, we're blinded by, like, this empty space behind their head that there's nothing there. And it at that point, all the talking bubbles look very, very crowded, and your dialogue then starts looking muddled.
Yeah. There was a lot of little moments like that with the art.
Mm-hmm.
And you bring up the Superman and the Justice League thing. That was one of the parts I absolutely hated. And I don't know if it was supposed to be funny, but when Superman acts like he's 12 years old, like,
Yes, yeah.
and he tells Batman to be a gentleman, meaning don't have sex with Zatanna. I'm like, dude, well, you're a grown-ass man.
Do you know where your son came from?
Yeah. You do realize that your son came from Lois's vagina, not a stork, right? You do understand that, right?
You do. Did, like, maybe Mike,
And I know.
Lois got Superman super drunk and made him black out.
So you're saying Lois raped Superman, and he doesn't remember?
Maybe that's the only way he can have sex.
Oh,
It could be. I mean, otherwise he might kill someone. He's
That's
Superman.
True. That's true. No, that moment was so. I think it was uncalled for. Like, listen, we know Superman is a Boy Scout.
Yes.
Being Boy Scout and following rules and having a strong, strict code of honor, right?
Yeah.
And you don't deviate from what you believe in, and you never do the wrong thing. You do the right thing. That's his Boy Scout mentality. He isn't a child, though, who doesn't understand the nuances of fucking.
Yes. and that's the thing about, like, especially
We're getting a little stupidly upset at certain things, but those are the moments that kind of just got under my skin. It irked me. I'm like, that's annoying.
and here's the thing, art can play heavily on that because, like, if you decide to actually go lackluster with your art and start to be lazy, then you all of a sudden bring, well, if the art's lazy, then the writing might be lazy, and you might be lazy with your dialogue. Decharacterizations of characters is lazy writing in comics.
Right.
If you cannot write a character properly when you're given, like, say if you're given Superman as an assignment, you may not like it, but you better know how to write Superman. that's the thing in comics. You have to know to write the character you're given. And like that is the one thing I don't want to be too hard on this story because like it does have its shining moments.
It does.
I mean, like there is one of my favorite artistic moments that they decided to do.
Just move into your final thoughts too, Dave.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Continue your thought though. I'm sorry.
One of the artistic moments I really dug was in the very end where you have that moment where they close the rift, right? And the artist decides to draw Batman and Zatanna in different renditions throughout their lives, reaching out to each other, and then coming together, basically showing that at the very start when they were children, in every era of their superhero, their history, they've always reached out to each other. And I like that. I like that take on that artistic splash page because it says so much more than just they reach out to each other and close the rift. No, you're saying much more than that. You're saying
Poetic.
It's poetic. It ties to their history. And when I saw that splash page, by the end of the story, that splash page helped me think, you know what? This whole time, we've always said Batman and Catwoman. Can we do a freaking year of Batman actually having a stable relationship with someone besides Catwoman? Like, I don't know, Zatanna? Put him with Zatanna.
How dare you?
I know. But you know what? That might be funny, though, Mike.
No.
If Zatanna gets into a relationship with Batman, imagine Constantine.
No one wants to see that, David.
Constantine coming in, you might get the Eiffel Tower moment.
Oh, okay.
You might get it. Because Constantine might go, hey, listen,
I rather...
you took my girl, but how about just one last lay, you know?
Oh.
I like you.
No,
I'm
listen,
bisexual.
I'd rather him cuckold Batman.
You want him to cuckold Batman. I'm just imagining that because John Constantine would do that.
If I was a porno director, I'd be writing the script right now.
He'd be like, Batman, you're in the corner.
Kendra Lust, you're gonna play Zatanna. Tell me she would have looked great as Zatanna.
Oh my God, man, yeah.
I don't know male porn stars very well, so I don't know who could play Constantine, but he better have a big old magical dick.
But my final thoughts on this one, you know, I give a lot of props to the writing team and the artist team that was behind the story. I don't mean to sound harsh on it, but the story itself could have been a lot better. As a final score for it, I gave it a 72.
Okay.
I know that for like comics, especially when it comes to me grading comics, that sounds bad, but I'm like going, there's a lot of stuff here you could have built on. But the one thing I thought that really hindered it, because I know that you only read the story,
Bound to Our
Wills. I decided to read the whole thing, you know, from beginning to end, including all the other stories around it.
You read the whole Batman anthology issue.
Yes.
Yeah.
And like the problem with it, when you have this one story in 6 issues and 6 parts, and you have all these other little stories, they take away your momentum.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the other stories in between the Bound to Our Wills, some of them were better.
Yeah.
And that kind of hindered it. I think that hurt my grade on the story because I decided I'm going to read the whole thing because while it sounds unfair, that's the game you play.
It's an anthology series.
It's an anthology series.
Yeah.
You have to be graded on on what assignment you were given.
Yeah. Okay, Dave. I'm going to give this storyline, Bound to Our Will, issues 1 through 6, a 68% on the RMD score. The story and the emotional element or impact, for me, felt forced when it came to Batman and Zatanna. They built this history between Zatanna and Bruce, and we're supposed to believe that this has been getting in between them for decades. Like, when? We never saw this. We never seen them fight with each other or refuse to talk to each other. Did we?
Not really.
Yeah. I mean, there's been illusions that they've had a relationship, but there was never... Did you ever get the vibe that there was animosity, that they didn't really want to talk to each other?
No, you just felt that basically they were two people in two different stages in their lives.
Yeah, I feel like they're taking. I'm all about liberties, as you know, creative liberties. Writers should take creative liberties, but when you're dealing with established canon and you're forcing this relationship that obviously never happened because they weren't able to create that believability. It just feels like a one-off, almost like an Elseworlds. If it was that, then I'd shrug and say okay. It was playful, which worked at times, especially between Constantine and Batman. Their interplay was interesting.
was very
Oftentimes,
interesting.
it was just the two of them having to work together. There were times, though, when Constantine just got annoying because of his flirtatious nature. It felt like
Yes.
it felt like he was a 15-year-old hormonal. I can't talk, David. It felt like he was a 15-year-old boy, hormonal boy,
Yes.
trying to get his dick wet.
Any way he can.
He was introduced by flirting with the bartender at the beginning. Then he flirts with Batman literally every chance he can get. Like, one or two flirts, fine. Moments of flirting works just fine. But when that's all you do, it seemed like every panel was some type of sexual innuendo. I felt like that just felt a little forced because of the recent, I don't want to say recent, but because of the current social climate where we're really trying to push, LGBTQ, which, listen, I'm all about that. Let's push it out there. But that doesn't mean all your stories need to be filled with contrived moments that feel like they're trying to convey, we know that Constantine is bisexual. We know that.
Yeah.
I don't know if that makes sense, but
No, it does, because like it goes back to like what I was saying about Superman. It's a decharacterization of a character when you are not writing the character correctly to his own characteristics.
And for the most part, Constantine was handled pretty good. But then the overly flirtatious aspects, we know that he flirts. We know there's a wink wink. But every encounter was an excuse to sexually harass or say something sexually suggestive.
Yes.
Literally every panel.
Even to Batman, which was funny.
Just to Batman. I don't even think, did he even flirt with Zatanna?
Actually, no.
I don't think he even flirted
he
with
did.
Zatanna. I'm specifically talking about Batman, Constantine and Batman. It was like every fucking page. Like, we get it. We get it. Constantine goes both ways and he might want to fuck Batman. We get it. So it was that part kind of agitated me just because it was way too much to where he became a little annoying.
Oh yeah, because like it's like it's the in thing to do. It feels like you as the artist are just trying to force an agenda set to you by the editors.
Yeah, or maybe it's just whatever. It's what they felt like. That's what Constantine does. Who knows? Everyone has their own perceptions, right?
But that goes back to my statement that basically you're not understanding the character then.
Yeah. All right, so this does bring us to the end. As people can tell, this isn't the greatest Constantine storyline, but it does have its strong moments. If you're an avid or rabid Constantine fan, then yes, definitely check these issues out. It would probably be worth a read for you. If you're not all about it and you're only about the immediate Constantine storylines, like his specific storylines, then you're probably not going to dig this.
You could skip it.
Yeah, you could definitely skip it. There isn't anything canon shattering, meaning there isn't anything that you have to know in this story to understand Constantine. It feels like more of the same. So there aren't any moments that reveal moments to his backstory. There's no allusions to that. He's specifically a writing device to help us get inside of Batman's psyche and to understand and dissect him.
Pretty much.
So, and it did work for that. That's why I say overall it's strong how they used them. All right, this brings us to the end. I want to thank everyone for listening. I should remind people really quick that we do have a Patreon page. If you want to get more House of Mystery, you can pledge just $1 to our Patreon page, and you'll gain access to our Patreon exclusive show titled The Oblivion Bar, which is essentially a mini cast or a mini version of this show. And typically we get into topics in that discussion that we don't have time for in our regular show. It's kind of like an overflow show of sorts. So check that out. Go to patreon.com/RaymanDigital and pledge. Thank you, David.
Thank you.